Our story starts at the National Opera House in Hamburg, Germany, where an orchestra is getting ready for a rehearsal. Little do they know, a group of armed thugs is sneaking in on them. Since no one in the orchestra is aware of the danger, the criminals start spreading out. The conductor arrives and the rehearsal begins as usual, but it doesn't last long. Soon enough, the thugs barge in and fire shots into the air. Meanwhile, John and his rescue team are already on the scene. He gives his final orders to the squad just as the gang goes live on their broadcast, announcing they've taken over the opera house and are demanding a $300 million ransom.
All you have to do is help us meet our goal of 300 million.
John warns his team to hold on fire until he gives the word, but the gang leader grabs a woman and shoots her dead on the spot. This forces Matteo, with no other option, to go against John's orders and fire at the thugs. John quickly orders the other teams to engage, and soon his squad is taking down most of the criminals in a fierce shootout. Once the dust settles, John confronts Matteo for disobeying orders.
I gave you an order, so you're gonna get us all killed! You jeopardized the whole mission!
But it's clear Matteo's been shot, and things aren't looking good. Just then, a thug disguised as a hostage springs to life.
No, you haven't saved anybody. I'm just gonna blow up this place.
Matteo takes him out, but tragically, John is hit and killed. Matteo's split-second decision cost John his life. 5 years later, we find Matteo in Romania, retired from special forces and working in a small town called Assam Mill. Even though he's left his old life behind, John's death still haunts him. Matteo looks at a photo and is reminded of the good times he had with John's family. On payday, he announces he's retiring for good, buys a ticket to Bucharest, and climbs into his van, ready to leave. Meanwhile, in Amsterdam, an Interpol team led by Shira successfully intercepted a shipment of drugs, dealing a significant blow to various mafia organizations. One mob boss reports to Saban, the head of the cartel, that their drugs have been seized by Interpol. As it turns out, one of the captured criminals is an undercover Interpol agent who had helped with the bust. Shira tells the agent they need to apply more pressure because their ultimate goal is to capture the mafia leaders.
But I want the whole consociation, not its droppings.
When Matteo arrives in Amsterdam, we meet a businessman named Paul, who's deep into the world of cryptocurrency. He's on a call with a potential client, trying to convince them to invest in crypto, not because he believes in its potential, but he's trying to cover his own losses by getting others to fall into the same trap. At the same time, Matteo is standing nervously at Helen's door. After a moment of hesitation, he knocks. It's Helen's daughter, Angie, who answers, and Matteo asks her to get her mother. When Helen comes to the door, she's shocked to see him. She invites him inside for coffee, though she's clearly still processing his sudden appearance. Once inside, Matteo learns that Helen is now married to Paul. The conversation turns tense as Helen confronts Matteo, accusing him of not attending John's funeral, even though he was like a brother to him. Matteo, clearly burdened, apologizes and admits that John's death was his fault. He tries to explain how it happened, but Helen refuses to hear it.
It should have been me.
Shut up!
She's furious, upset that he's come back after all these years, dredging up pains she's worked hard to move on from.
That when you couldn't even be bothered to show up for his funeral. What kind of brother does that?
After an awkward apology, Matteo leaves, but Helen catches a glimpse of him standing outside the house, looking crushed. Feeling a pang of guilt, she invites him to stay in the guest room, at least until he figures out what he's going to do with his life. Matteo accepts. Later, Helen shows him some of John's old belongings that she had kept for no real reason. She tells Matteo that he should have them. Meanwhile, Saban talks about their current situation and the previous cargo theft. It's at this moment that Saban and his crew realize there's a mole in their midst.
We don't continue business until it's found.
Back at the house, Paul notices that Matteo and Angie are together. Helen tells him that Matteo was John's friend and will be staying with them for a while. Later that evening, Matteo sits outside, lost in thought. He reflects on his time with John back in Afghanistan, where they were on a mission together. They had talked about their families, and John had shared the news that Helen was pregnant. Angie tells her mom that she's really starting to like Matteo.
I think he needs a new friend.
And Paul also wants to chat with him. Matteo tells him that there's always something worth fighting for. Back inside, Paul mentions that Matteo seems emotionally scarred, but Helen reassures him, saying he doesn't need to worry. Matteo and John had been through a lot together. The next morning, Matteo finds a note from Angie asking him not to leave without saying goodbye. So he goes out for a run. On his way back, he spots Helen and Angie heading out to school. Helen asks Matteo if he can look after her dog while she's at work. Meanwhile, Saban shows up to confront Paul about the missing $15 million in his account. Paul tries to explain that the cryptocurrency market has hit a rough patch, but insists it'll all work out soon.
There were some complications, and I should have let you know.
Saban, however, doesn't seem convinced. He looks at a photo of his family and coldly reminds Paul that he's only got one more day to fix this mess.
Don't fuck up, Paul.
As Saban leaves, we see Interpol's undercover agents tailing him. When Saban and his crew get into their car, we notice Roman, the informant, lurking nearby. He's pretending to fiddle with his phone, trying to snap a picture, but he's so focused on his mission that he doesn't realize he's being tailed as well. Feeling burnt out, Mateo spends the day doing some woodworking before Helen invites him to go on a hike. He started building a treehouse for Angie, hoping to keep his mind busy. Later, a worried Paul comes home, and Helen asks him what's wrong. He only tells her he's got some accounting issues to deal with, not mentioning anything about Saban. Elsewhere, a group of tourists on boat stumbles upon a horrifying sight, a body hanging from a bridge. Turns out it was an inside job. One of Saban's men found out the victim had been working with Interpol and took him out. When Shira and her partner arrive at the scene, they immediately recognize the victim as one of their informants. Paul, back at his office, watches the news about a new cryptocurrency collapse. It dawns on him that he made a huge mistake investing in the wrong currency, and to make things worse, he used his client's money, leading to massive losses. Right then, Paul gets a call from Saban, demanding his money back since Paul only had a day left. Paul promises to fix the situation, but Saban doesn't even bother yelling. He just sends some men to take care of it. Shira and her partner realize the thugs are sending them a message, but the phone's facial recognition is too damaged to unlock. Angie teases Mateo about his scar, hugging him tightly, and Helen notices the bond forming between them. It's family pizza night, but Paul calls to say he won't make it because of some urgent business. While they're eating pizza outside, Angie gives Mateo a drawing, and Helen asks him to stay a little longer for Angie's sake. She tells him John would have loved to see the two of them so close. Just when things start to feel like they're turning around, chaos erupts. Out of nowhere, 4 masked men armed with baseball bats ambush Mateo. Angie runs, but not to escape. She's trying to protect Mateo. One of the thugs targets her, but he quickly pays for his cruelty. In the end, though, this was all about Angie. Attacking Mateo was just a distraction. As Helen and Mateo lie beaten on the ground, one of the thugs grabs Angie and throws her into a car. Mateo pulls himself up and steals a bike, pedaling after the kidnappers. Helen borrows a phone and calls Paul, telling him that Angie's been kidnapped. He immediately knows what's going on and tries calling Saban for help, but Saban just hangs up. Mateo keeps chasing after the car, and before long, he manages to jump onto another vehicle, smashing the window and fighting the thugs inside. But as he looks in, he realizes Angie isn't there. Determined, he pulls each thug out one by one, and the chase continues until they finally crash. Mateo wakes up in the hospital, handcuffed to the bed. Helen is outside in the hallway, shouting at a police officer, and Angie is still missing. Shira and her partner take over to the case. Mateo, still cuffed to the bed, is now suspected of being involved in Angie's kidnapping because the men he threw out of the car worked for Saban, a notorious crime boss involved in various illegal activities, drug trafficking included. But strangely, kidnapping had never been part of their operations. Due to a lack of evidence, Mateo is eventually released. Shira asks him what his next move is, and he tells her he's going to rescue Angie. She fills him in on Saban and the other gangs possibly connected to the case. Based on their investigation, the kidnapping seems personal, but when they ask Helen and Paul if they know anything, Paul remains suspiciously silent. Shira hands Mateo her card, and after everyone leaves, she and her partner try to piece together how Saban is involved in the kidnapping. One of Saban's men notices their investigation. Meanwhile, Angie is being held at Saban's club. He finds out that Mateo has been released from the hospital. He tells Angie she'll be going home soon, but his orders to his men are quite different. They're considering selling her to an international crime syndicate.
We can give her to the Thais.
Mateo reflects on the drawing Angie gave him and remembers when John asked him to be Angie's godfather.
Are you serious?
It means if something happens to me, then you're gonna watch over her.
Driven by his promise, he starts gathering the tools he needs for her rescue. When Paul shows up to warn him, he accidentally lets slip about Saban's connection to the Thais family.
How do you know he's connected to the Thai?
Realizing Paul knows more than he's letting on, Mateo confronts him. Finally getting the truth. Paul had embezzled $15 million from Saban. Taking John's gun back from Paul, Mateo forces him to call Saban, pretending he has the money. They arrange a trade. Angie for the cash. Saban agrees, and they settle on a meeting at a construction site. Before heading out, Mateo assures Helen he'll bring Angie home. Meanwhile, Shira and Interpol realize Paul is hiding something. She tells her partner to keep an eye on Paul's house. But before long, Mateo ambushes the agent, taking his car and driving off. Helen invites the agent inside for coffee and calls Paul to talk things through. Paul, now fully aware that Mateo is working with Interpol, begins to panic. Mateo heads to the construction site for the trade, where he encounters a group of thugs. He demands they hand over Angie, but they're shocked to reveal that Angie isn't with them. The whole deal was just a setup to retrieve the money.
The deal was, you bring us the money and the girl doesn't die.
They forcibly take Mateo's bag, but when their leader opens it, he finds a bomb inside. The explosion injures several thugs, sending the rest running. Back at the house, Helen is confronted by one of Saban's men. A brief fight breaks out, and the thug slashes the agent repeatedly with a knife before Helen scares him off by firing. Paul starts packing to leave, knowing the situation is spiraling out of control. Mateo ties up one of the injured thugs and tortures him for Angie's location, but at first, the man refuses to talk. Eventually, he cracks and gives up the hideout. Helen takes care of the wounded Interpol agent, but when they ask Paul for help, he coldly ignores them and heads toward his car. However, one of Saban's men has been waiting for him and slits him before he can leave. Shira arrives just as the thugs flee the scene. She sits with her partner in the car, trying to calm him down. Mateo contacts Shira, telling her to bring backup for Angie's rescue. Meanwhile, Saban grows anxious, not hearing any word from his men. He sits with Angie and asks her a few questions.
Do you think he's gonna come here and come get you?
Mateo reaches the club, where he engages in a shootout with the guards trying to stop him. When Shira arrives with her team, they join the fight, and the situation quickly escalates. As Mateo and Shira clear out the remaining thugs, Saban decides to flee with Angie. However, he leaves some of his men behind to slow Mateo down. A brutal fight ensues when Mateo and Shira encounter them, with both sides taking heavy damage. Saban keeps running with Angie as the battle rages on. Mateo decides to go after them alone. When he finally catches up, Saban warns him not to come any closer or he'll shoot Angie. In a split second, Mateo throws a knife straight into Saban's chest. Though Saban manages to fire his gun, Mateo miraculously survives and Angie runs to him. 6 months later, Angie and Helen are together, still unsure if Mateo will ever return. Meanwhile, Mateo is once again sailing alone at sea. As Shira's partner receives an honorary medal, Shira approaches him, reminding him they still have more work to do. The film ends here. Don't forget to subscribe for more recap. Thanks for watching. Have a great day.